can have dinner with anyone you admire, they could be alive or dead, doesn't matter, who would you choose and why?
Can we go forward? I would choose the first female president. That is who I would like to have.
Oh, you time traveled, Cece. Brilliant.
What would be your question you'd ask her?
What year is it?
Ooh, what year is it? But what would you want to know? Like, what's the one thing that you would hone in on?
Honestly, I think it is more around, like, I love just hearing people's journeys of like how they got to where they got, and I'm so fascinated to know what that journey will look like for somebody who breaks that ultimate ceiling that still exists.
Welcome to the Warriors at Work show. This is Jeanie Coomber, your guide and host. This is a show for men and women in the workplace who want to move from the predictable to the potent. This is your weekly dose of inspiration with an edge. I talk with CEOs and shamans, sports marketing executives and therapists. All of us are like-minded thinkers and doers who tell stories, share wisdom, and challenge each other to have the best life possible inside and outside the office. Welcome to your Warrior Conversation.
Hey everybody, it's Jeanie. Thanks so much for joining me at the Warriors at Work show. So did you ever wonder what it takes to launch a startup? The logistics, the skills, the partnerships, the fundraising, and then scale the business? What does grit, determination, creativity, flexibility, open-heartedness, and support look like within a founder relationship? And then the team that surrounds them. What if you put a COVID overlay into that picture? What does it look like now? Well, this month you're going to hear from a few brave warriors that launched a very successful brand. And first up is the founders of Chief, CEO Carolyn Childers and Chief Brand Officer Lindsay Kaplan. So I first worked with Lindsay when she was an executive at another company, and then reconnected with her as she was beginning her journey with Carolyn in the creation of the network for executive women, Chief. They launched in 2019, now have over 10,000 members, 40,000 by the way, on waitlist, and it's only getting bigger and stronger every damn day. In this conversation, we talk about why Chief. You're going to hear that journey of a startup. Why each other? Why the heck did they decide to do this together? And then what's the journey been like? And not just the glorious moments, the profound, but we also talk about the pain and the mistakes. Most importantly, we get to how is Chief going to play a part in the future of business. This is a straight-talking, heartfelt, and fun conversation that reinforced for me the incredible strength, the smarts, and the fierceness of women in business. It is my absolute pleasure to bring to you Carolyn and Lindsay and the story of Chief in their own words. Enjoy. Okay, here we are. Oh my goodness. Carolyn and Lindsay, so grateful to have you in this interview. I'm so psyched for this. So here's where I want to start. I want to share with you some stats about Chief, and then I want to get your reaction. Ready? So here we are, 2022. Let's just think about, holy crap, 3 years, okay? 10,000 members, 40,000 members or women on wait list, 6,500 companies. You have national reach now. Your brand statement, private network designed for the most powerful women in executive leadership. You're on a mission to drive more women to the top and keep them there. What do you feel when you hear all of that?
It doesn't always sink in. Like, it's actually really nice to have moments like this where like you take a step back and just realize where you've gotten. And I feel like before we get too far into this conversation, Jeanie, we need to set like the stage of you being there with us in a,
I'm getting to that.
bachelor pad in Tribeca that we were trying to make into our first clubhouse. And like thinking about that to where we are right now is just kind of incredible. I think what is actually more meaningful to me than like a singular number of like X number of members is the conversations you get to have with individual members of the impact that Chief has. And I think that is the thing that resonates most with me, with Lindsay, with our entire team. It is the thing that we most look forward to is a Slack channel within our company that talks about like the feedback we get and the stories that we hear. And I think the ripple effect that we can now have with 10,000 members of change that can happen and progress that hopefully we can help drive is really what is the most exciting part of it.
Lindsay, how about you? What's your reaction?
Well, I love hearing those numbers because, like Carolyn, I think there's a bit of disbelief, in part because it's moved really quickly. And Carolyn and I have spent more time in pandemic mode than we have in a traditional startup setting together. And so there is a bit of a disconnect of hearing those numbers and feeling it, because I still get out of bed, roll up next to my desk at home most days. And so it's, like Carolyn, amazing to hear the numbers and incredible to hear the stories, because it often doesn't feel real. And that impact can be so powerful on individuals that it's amazing to hear it.
Yeah. Well, let's go back to the beginning, because I want to take us back to end of 2018, early 2019. Here's what I recall. You fill in the blanks. I remember the new construction in Tribeca. I actually remember the wallpaper that was behind you often. Carolyn, when we would talk, you'd be like, yeah, this is coming down. They're putting this up. We're lining up investors. You're in mad dash pitch mode. The two of you were just out there putting it all out there. You were hiring your first employee. I remember that was super exciting. We were trying to figure out, what is core going to be? Like, what is this going to look like? Who are those original guides going to be? What are they going to be doing? How long are we going to be doing this? Tell us, like, what was your biggest worry in those moments?
I think the for me, God, I have to put myself back there and really make sure that I'm not doing revisionist history right now of, what was truly most worrisome. I honestly think that we were building a women's professional network. And unfortunately, like, that as a idea did not conjure up a aspirational, inspirational place that you wanted to be in, a place that you would take great pride in being a part of, that would have this great impact on you. You typically would think of, a networking event as a place where you awkwardly are going and exchanging maybe a business card, if people still have those, with like warm white wine and, name tags. And I really probably most worried about, how does this break through? And how do we ensure that this as a thing that is so needed for women is understood that it is different, and that we were truly building a place for people to really dive into how they become better leaders at a deeper level of support. And that, to me, I think was the biggest concern, is how do you break through?
Do you remember how many groups you both were excited to see? You were like, by this date, we think we're going to have this many. Do you remember the number?
We were truly, we wanted to have 100 founding members.
I remember
that was like our goal. We want to have 100 founding members.
Get 100.
Yeah. I remember that.
And Lindsay was like, we'll just give it all away for free if we have to. We're going to get to the 100. And our investors were like, oh, it's going to be all of your friends. And Lindsay and I are like, we don't have enough friends.
Let alone 100 friends. Between Carolyn and I, we would be lucky to invite 6 members in for free.
And when did you get to 100? Do you remember?
Very quickly. We sent out cold emails as like a very first tactic for ourselves. we still have the email that we sent where 2 hours after sending it, we had our first paid customer who was the chief customer officer of Walmart. Cold email. And that, I think, was that moment where we were like, this is something that is clearly going to resonate with people. We did a press release off of our first seed fundraise and had thousands of women join the wait list. And it was just kind of incredible, where that 100 felt not only achievable, but we needed to raise expectations of what we needed to build for and who we needed to build for, because the people that were joining were amazing and we just had such big interest.
Yeah, I think looking back, we had a struggle raising our seed round. We went on a bit of a road show. We went to San Francisco. We hit the pavement in New York, and we had a hard time. I think we had investors that really liked us and really liked the idea, but kind of had a question mark around, I'm not sure how big this can be and if people will join. And so we were really lucky to find incredible early investors, but it was difficult. It was not easy. And so prior to launch, I think that stuck in our heads of, are people going to want to join this? You know, I'm sure a few people will. We'll invite our 6 friends. But is the demand really here? We felt the demand. Our gut knew that there was demand. The market sizing that we did looked good. But at the end of the day, when you launch something, you don't know if people are actually going to sign up for it. And so that was the real fear and paranoia going into it. And we were quickly surprised and delighted to see, people wanted it.
Yeah.
I would say like early days for any like wannabe entrepreneur out there, early days, particularly post or pre-launch, the darkest of your entire entrepreneurial, because you're just in your head. Like you don't know if it's going to be great. You don't know if it's going to be bad. It was probably like the hardest time for Lindsay and I as co-founders too, of like,
because all we had were each other to spar off of. And I remember coming home from this tiff with Carolyn, and I remember my husband saying, it's just you two. And the second you have members and you have team, it'll be you two versus the world. And right now it's just you two versus each other. But there was no feedback, right? There's no answer when you're disagreeing about something. There's no feedback. There is no right or wrong as an entrepreneur pre-launch. There is zero validation. And so I think Carolyn and I had a good growing season of our relationship early on. The growing season.
Well said, Lindsay. Well said.
And so, it was a lot of pressure externally. Like I remember trying to get a lawyer who I would pay. And the lawyer was like, I think this is a really nice lifestyle business. I don't think you should be raising VC capital. So I don't think that I am the lawyer for you. And I was like, I'm going to pay you. You're saying no.
Carolyn showed up with a briefcase full of cash. And the lawyer was like, I don't know.
Wow. I never heard you share those stories before. I'm so glad I asked, because I think it's really important how you just both articulated that for anybody that is thinking about creating something and bringing it to market. So why do you think there has been such explosive growth? What are the differentials here?
I think there's a few things. One, I do think that the format of what we have created is different. You referenced, the early days of us trying to figure out what core is. And core is honestly just a really unique experience for somebody to be able to go through that. When you talk about having a network of people that you can tap into, it's usually really superficial, and core is just not. And I think that their analogy that was out there in the world for us that we kind of used to model what we were building with an organization called YPO. And even just being able to reference to that for people who kind of knew what that experience was and knew that this was going to be different. Lindsay is the queen of analogies. And I do think that like finding a way to bring some anchoring of what somebody can expect to the table. And I think that helped us a lot of being able to, articulate that this was going to be a different experience. This is going to be a place for you to have a much deeper conversation and deeper support. And it was coupled with, and Lindsay, one of her analogies is like, you got to have the vegetables and you got to have the dessert. And, we had the vegetables of core. Core is definitely a vegetable. It is work in some ways of deep exploration of yourself and your challenges. And, you are in a place of growth, which can often be uncomfortable. And so we had to make sure we had the dessert around it too. And I think the two combos together, and I'll leave Lindsay to talk about the dessert because that is her specialty. But the combo, I think, is what really made it resonate. Lindsay, you want to tell us about the dessert?
So the dessert side of the house, maybe not as important as core, but I think to build out the experience, we really wanted to make sure that it didn't just feel like something you had to do, right? Core is amazing for growth. It is amazing for a leadership journey. But we also wanted to pair that with incredible speakers, this beautiful clubhouse that was designed in a way that felt sophisticated and where she could meet people. The beginning of the online component where people were forging connections with people that were outside of their industries, their roles, bringing core groups together. So really, I think what set us apart was not only thinking about bringing these different disparate services together under one roof, but also knowing this is a super underserved market. Like I look at this woman, average age of a chief member, I believe now is 46. This woman is I like to say it's almost like a movie character of busy, right? Like there's not enough time in the day. And so I think she has largely been ignored by leadership programs, sending her off to bad conferences. And so to give her something that felt like this is for her and was worth her time, I don't think a lot of networks, offerings have done prior. And one of our most essential brand values that we put nearly everything we do through this filter is time travel. And Jeanie, you and I had a conversation about this really early around core. How do we make sure that she comes to chief when she sits in that core room with the 10 people around her for 2 hours? How does she walk out feeling like I've known these people for years? How do we make sure that we are giving her maximum amount of value without her investing too much of her precious time? And that is such an important part of chief. It really is not only about giving her this experience of different services, but making sure that they are impactful and they are delivering on the value that she can take away and bring back to her busy, crazy, powerful life.
Talk about delivering on the value. I want to talk about the beginnings of your partnership around this. So take us back to the creation. The idea even, where did it come from? How did you two meet? And how did you decide, okay, you and we're it. Let's go get this.
Yeah. So the irony of all of this is that Lindsay and I actually first met at a pretty bad women's networking event.
It was all right in the sense that I had a few glasses of wine.
That is so awesome that it was crappy and the two of you were both there going, this is crap.
We've all been to these events. It was a dinner. You were stuck in your chair. Maybe there were good people around the table, but you were kind of trapped. One person monopolized the conversation and kind of took it off course. It was not me. We know who it was, by the way. We know who that person was. And Carolyn and I actually didn't even meet at the dinner. We went and we were at the coat check and I kind of rolled my eyes and we just had this like, that I know that this was not a good dinner. And we casually introduced each other and stayed in touch.
Yeah. And then I think I started to really think about, I'm somebody who goes very heads down in my career, that, just is focused on the work that I'm doing and isn't really actually focused on, how do I continue to build my network? How do I think and grow from externalities instead of just like the work that I am doing? And I knew that that was an area that I really wanted to invest in. And I started to think about like, well, where do I go for that? Like, how do I continue to grow as a leader? And started to do a bunch of research on what was available, found that it was nothing that I was inspired by, and really started to think about this idea of creating this network for senior executive women in particular. And immediately just thought, like, I need to talk to Lindsay about this, because going back to what we were talking about before, one of the things that was so much in my mind was, how does this break through? And Lindsay, like, her superpower is, how do you create a brand that resonates and breaks through? And I joked, she was at Casper at the time, and I joked often, like, if you can make a mattress sexy, then like imagine what you can do with a women's professional network.
I do think similar challenges. When I joined Casper, I was pre-launch, and I remember thinking, mattress, ugh. How do there's a challenge here, because the bar is really low on the word. And similar, when Carolyn and I talked about women's professional network, I had the same, the bar is really low, right? Which is not an excuse. It's not an excuse to say the bar is low so we can do something that's okay, right? There is a beautiful, amazing challenge here. And again, really underserved market. Why is it we cringe when we hear the phrase women's professional network? Where does that come from? Right? Like, we are bringing incredible, powerful women together who are leaders, who are at the top of their game. Nobody should be cringing at this. And yet I cringed. So I was really excited when Carolyn talked to me about the original concept, because lifelong card-carrying feminist, thinking about my next moves and really wanting to do something that mattered. And what a dream to work on something every day of my life that matters.
And with your best friend. I'm just kidding.
Yes. And something that brings out
who would turn into my best friend.
Fair.
And something that you have so much passion and purpose, both of you, and it really capitalizes on your greatest strengths and your most effective self. You get to play with that every single day. So I felt compelled to say that back to you both as the coach in me that's been a part of this journey with you since the beginning. So, when I think about the creation of any business, there needs to be a certain level of readiness, not just the viability of the product or the service, but I'm thinking about it psychologically, emotionally, physically, soulfully, spiritually. How did you ready yourselves for this journey? And is that something that you're constantly aware of as it's growing and evolving?
I don't think there was any readiness on my side. I mean, I went straight from Casper. There was a little overlap where Carolyn and I were fundraising. And then I think I went to a wedding, came back, and we just were in it. There was no readiness. There was just work. I think that, again, the mission of Chief is so powerful, and I love what I do every single day, which is a joy and an honor to be driving impact for all of these incredible members, all of these amazing women. But I don't know. Carolyn, maybe you had more time to digest than I did, but I feel like we jumped in and it never slowed down. There was never a breath. It just was, it's like we jumped in the water and the current just keeps getting stronger.
Yeah. I don't think you can be mentally, spiritually ready. I don't think you know what you're preparing yourself for until you're in it.
Like having a kid. I don't know.
Yeah.
That's
like,
a
you're
good
never
analogy.
really ready to have a kid, because having a kid is insane and blows up your world. So even if you're ready, you're not really ready.
Yeah. Like, I think we were both functionally and skill set ready. I think that is something that we both had that you don't always have as an entrepreneur. I think people start a lot earlier in their careers on the path of entrepreneurship. And like Lindsay and I at least had many years as senior executives at other startups and at other organizations, which allowed us to build a very functional skill set. But that is very different than like the leadership skill set that comes with being founders of something, and the mental fortitude that comes with being a founder of something. And, I part of what was in my mind is I would be so, in some ways, disappointed in my career if I didn't go and build something myself, having seen and been so close to, and reporting directly into some amazing entrepreneurs. Like, I knew it was a journey that I wanted to go on. And I probably naively, as I reported to them, was like, I'm working hard too. Like, you don't understand the difference of pressure that it is when you are the founder. Like, the first employees that we hired, including bringing on Lindsay, like, I had this immense paranoia of, man, like, this person is willing to give me like their opportunity costs. Like, they can go and do great things, and they're choosing to do this. I better not. I would normally swear here.
Yeah,
mess it up.
Yeah,
Don't
yeah.
mess it up, Cece.
And that's just like a whole different level of mental pressure that isn't the same when you're hiring as a part of a company as a senior executive and doing things in that way. And there's just something about, I always thought about, I have been really successful in my career. It all will feel like it wasn't my success, but because I was at other companies, if this one doesn't succeed, because this one is me. Like, it almost felt like it would negate every other success in my entire career. And that's just a different level of like mental pressure that you have, that I don't think you can actually be prepared for going into.
That reminds me of a story early when we were, again, raising that seed, and it was really difficult for us to get those initial investors on board. I met with a VC that I'm friendly with. He and I have known each other for a while, and he writes small early stage checks. And he said to me, so, you were at Casper, but like, like maybe you just joined the rocket ship, like, how do I know that was you? I don't. And he ultimately passed. And God, did that light a fire under me. He regrets it. He's later been like, I should have invested. I messed up. Thank you. I appreciate that. But it was to hear, well, you were at Casper and Casper took off, but I don't know if that was you, Lindsay. Like, maybe you got lucky. Oh my God. Like, the intensity of feeling like this cannot fail because this is my name, right? Like, I have worked at startups prior. Some of them did exceptionally well. Some of them fizzled out, and never was I kind of, helping to drive that car forward. So I think there's a lot of pressure. And I think Carolyn and I are both really driven, competitive people. And we have a lot of pride in what we do and what we stand for and our work. So it's not just, we want to be successful. We want to, like, in our heart of hearts, there is a drive there that really anchors Cece and I to the same value of just finding success and making sure that nothing stops us from achieving what our goals are.
Well, it's such a beautiful segue because I want to dive a little bit more into the two of you individually.
Well, she's a Virgo. I am a classic Gemini.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Very, very Virgo over here.
I'm Capricorn. I know you're shocked by that. So tell us how you've evolved just as business people and as human beings over the course of this last 3 years. Just think about like who you were, where you were when you started versus now. Like, tell us a little bit about that arc.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's so many different stages of a startup. I remember, early days of Chief, and Lindsay and I would have the conversation of like, when you only have one impression out there, you have like so much pressure on it being like the perfect impression of like whatever it is that you just launched or whatever campaign you put out there, whatever social media post you put out there, whatever it is, you only have one, and that is like defining your entire brand and business. And so I think in the very early days, Lindsay and I were really protective of like, what are we building and in it. And, I am somebody who grew up on playing sports my entire life. I love the like team concept, and Lindsay and I were just like in all of it, like every detail. And I think there's a real evolution that we have gone on over the last few years, of how do you really figure out how you articulate what matters to you so that it is a scalable being. And I think that's not just like the brand or the experience. It is our values. It is like our ways of working. Like, how do we ensure that that continues to extend now that we're not in those meetings every day and those decisions every day? And it's a big journey to go on. And it's, we are now getting close to 200 team members. And even what we did last year is not going to work for us this year of how we really go and ensure that. And I think one of the things that I will speak for myself and Lindsay, I remember early career opportunities for me. Like I launched soap.com, which was a part of Quidsi, and Mark Laurie basically like hired me. I had no e-commerce experience. I should not be helping to like launch a brand new e-commerce startup with a massive marketing budget. And like, I had no idea what was happening. And yet like he gave me that autonomy and I learned so much. And I look at that as such a way in which I hope that we can operate at Chief, of how do we allow for like the next generation of amazing entrepreneurs to be grown out of Chief by giving giving them those opportunities to learn, the ability to have the autonomy. And for us, I think that means how do we catalyze and crystallize what is really important to us that allows for them to go on that journey themselves.
Yeah, and it took us years to actually crystallize some of this. So, we didn't actually put pen to paper and publish our brand values and put it into what that meant for our team until this year. And we started, building this in 2018. It took a while, and I wish we had done that sooner. And I think part of that was, again, us feeling protective, us feeling like things were changing a bit. And at least for me, I have a hard time of putting things on paper because I don't love committing, because I love change. I love evolution. And when it goes on paper, it feels like I can never change it. Like I have to get out of editing mode. And it was a really big move for us to commit to what our brand values are. And again, use those as filters for our team to really think through the decision-making at every level of the business. And I think a lot of companies use brand values as like a more touchy-feely, cultural, this is what we look for when we hire, we talk about it, maybe the review process, these come up again. And it was really important for Carolyn and I to figure out how we take, again, like what is in our brains and hearts and hands, and use that as filters for the team. Because we can't make those small decisions anymore. We need to make sure that we are empowering our team to think in these different ways and to use these filters appropriately.
So let's talk about those other people in your life that you're surrounded by, whether they're friends, their families. Like, who are those people in your life that are keeping it real? Like the way you were both describing what you just said, I had this visual of each of you separately at a family party. And a family member is saying, "Oh, have you spoken to Carolyn yet or spoken to Lindsay yet? You're not going to believe what they're up to." I'd love to hear like how do they describe you, and then how do they support you?
My family, I love them. I think they are very confused and in awe of how big Chief is. So if it doesn't feel real to me, it really doesn't feel real to them. Again, in part because it's hard to see it if you're not seeing it. It's a giant network. So I think my family, I think Cece's family also similar. It's hard for my family to wrap their head around how big Chief is. They just know that Lindsay's gotten very, very busy and talks about members a lot.
Yeah, I would say similar. I think that perhaps like one of the like silver linings of this, Lindsay talked at the beginning of like, because of the pandemic, we've been in kind of the pandemic for so long that like we haven't had these moments to celebrate. But I also think that like because of the pandemic, we've been like so focused. And so like some of the like my parents, my family, like no idea what Chief is or what the experience is, partly because they can't just like go on and experience it themselves, which I think makes it even more like opaque of what it is. They just know that like we did something with Michelle Obama a few weeks ago and that seems pretty impressive, but like no idea. And I think that in many ways that has actually helped us remain focused, where like we haven't gotten caught up in a bunch of hype of like the success of it. And we are just like, and I think Lindsay and I are the type of people in general who like actually just love the work of the work. And so we would always kind of be in that place. But, you know, I think that is we haven't been at those dinner parties. Like we haven't been able to be at those dinner parties over the last few years, which has allowed us to like really stay focused because, you know, part of the reason we didn't put brand values down is we didn't know what the business was going to be in 2020. Like we had it kind of figured out in 2019. We were going on a path and everything was up for debate again in 2020. That we haven't had quite the opportunities to sit at dinner parties and say like, this is what I do. Isn't it exciting? And, you know, you always have very humbling experiences. I remember when I was raising my Series A, I had appendicitis. So I was like, I was in the hospital, literally on a call with Madeleine Albright to see if she wanted to like invest in Chief. It was like, this is my life right now. I'm in the middle of an ER in New York City on this phone call. Like that is like, it never feels like you can really get caught up in the hype of it because there's just too much work to do.
What about,
but I do think a lot of people get caught up in hype. And I have to say, Carolyn is one of the most down-to-earth people I've ever met. And I think I'm pretty down to earth as well. And it, again, when Carolyn and I are very different thinkers, but we are anchored in the same values of just, I mean, one of our brand values is real. The bigger brand value is just keeping it real. Like we just want to make sure that we don't ever get lost in whatever that startup hype bullshit mentality, you know, parties, like whatever that is. That's not Chief and it's not who we are. And I think it resonates in the business. And it's why our team is really authentic and cares about the work.
I love that. So let's talk about keeping it real between the two of you as co-founders. Talk to us on how you keep it real, whether it's resolving disagreements or deciding on strategy, vision. Give us a little inside baseball look here.
Well, I think, first of all, Carolyn and I are both very honest, self-aware people. And so we typically come to a conversation very aware of our own biases, our own strengths and weaknesses, and we upfront that almost always. And so there's usually never some like the thing that isn't said. We put it out there, and I think we try to do it in a way that's really respectful to one another because we know the ways of working. We know the way that we each enjoy feedback and conversation. And we've grown into a place that we can have a really great, respectful debate where it's not personal. And there's no drama. I think it's just very much real, authentic, what's best for the business conversations that guide us forward. And I also think we love to laugh and kind of mercilessly tease each other. Maybe I tease you too much, Cece, but like I can't help it. You're so easy to tease.
Just because you think you're funnier than I am, which I would hot debate. But we didn't start there. Like it took a while for us to get to a place of like a good, healthy, trustful relationship where, you know, at the beginning we knew each other and like we had deep respect for each other and each other's skill sets, but we didn't know each other. And like I remember an early conversation we had, Lindsay, I hope you're good with me telling this story. I have a feeling you know where I'm going. But like we did, when it was just the two of us, we'd have these like, I think this, no, I think this. And it was really hard for us to resolve. And Lindsay is one of those people who can like get in a hot debate and then like let it go after it happens. And I'm not that person. I am somebody that like, if you get into like what, like I'm not great at confrontation. I know I need to do it, but I'm not great at it. And so when we would have these like really animated debates at first, like I'd carry it. And there was this moment in the early part of our partnership where I actually asked Lindsay and I to do like an exercise together of like, if you had like one ask of me as a partner, like, what is it? Like, and I probably said like, what are your three? Because like, you know, me and consulting bullets, you always have to have three, but like, I did like, we wanted to do this exercise of like, all right, how can we better show up for each other? And it was like the most eye-opening thing to just hear what we both brought to that table. Cause like mine became very like, I really need you to like, she was talking before about like, she doesn't like to commit. I need you to make like the decision. I need to know what like the decision is and what the next steps are and that we're going to like move this thing forward. And like, it was so tactical of like what I needed because I'm such like an operator in my mind. And Lindsay's answer to me was, I just want to know that you're my friend. And it was such an eye-opening of like how we both think and got to understand each other so quickly in that moment, I feel like. And I would really encourage people who are working in partnership, either as co-founders, but even in like a manager-managee, like any of those types of relationships. So just take that time to understand what matters to people.
That is such great wisdom. I'd never heard that story either.
Really?
No.
Oh, yeah.
That's a good one. All right. So look, there's been lots of ups and downs, lots of peaks and valleys over the last 3 years. I'd love for each of you just take a moment and tell me like a real high and a real low. Like, where does your brain go? Like instinctively, this was my greatest, and this one was super tough.
Man, so many of the highs and lows are woven together.
Okay.
Right. So even I go back to that early fundraise of getting all of those no's and then getting the yes and the high of somebody saying, I believe in you. This is nothing yet. And I believe in you. That to me, they are inextractably woven together.
How about you,
It's really
Carolyn?
true, actually. Like it's usually the you can only feel really high because you were so low potentially right before it. Like even one of the highs that I think about, or just like the moment where I was like, this could be something really special. So Savannah Hoda came in, interviewed all of our members. It literally aired on March 13th. Like the Friday that most people did like the fake work from home, we're all going to test it. But then it actually was like permanent for 2 years. And all of a sudden we didn't know what our business was going to be. You know, so much of what we were doing was in person. We had to pivot everything. And yet, like, I still think of that as one of the highest times because the pride I have in my team, in the team of like, they didn't miss a beat. Like the speed with which they made that pivot, the like care that they had for each other. It's just like, it's all interwoven.
Oh, I have the chills. I remember all of that so vividly. All right. So let's talk about you both from things you're working on for your own growth and development.
How much time do we got left? We have enough to cover all of this?
So
I need a part two.
Just give us a highlight as CEO and then as Chief Brand Officer. Like, so tell us the thing that you're focused on from a leadership perspective or co-founding, whatever resonates with you with that question.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, one of the biggest changes that has happened over the last, period of time is that our leadership team is very different today than it was at the beginning of 2021. Completely different, actually, I think. And in that it didn't exist at the beginning of 2021. Not that we had turnover, but that like it didn't exist at the beginning of 2021. And I think that is an evolution that Lindsay and I are both going on of like it being kind of two co-founders to now like there is a senior executive team, there is a bigger team, and how do we really make sure that the relationships across that entire senior leadership team are really strong, that we all have really great connections, that we're empowering and supporting each other, and that we're starting to now spend more time of like, what is our North Star so that all of them can go and execute. That's a really big pivot that we're kind of going through of how we are executing. And again, as somebody who like grew up playing sports, I'd like to get in it. Like, I want to put me in, coach. I want to be part of the play. And like, that is a real change that I have to go on as a person of no longer, being the point guard, but being the coach on the sideline. So,
How about you, Lindsay?
I think about impact a lot. I think it's a theme for me this year around how do I have the most impact as a leader? How does my team have impact on the member experience? How do we make sure that the members feel the work that we're doing? There's so many people at Chief that put their heart's energy, time into building out what Chief is. And so I really want to make sure that one of those filters that I talk about this year is driving impact, top down. So not just for me and making sure that I'm working on the right areas that have big impact, but then that team, everybody within Chief, our whole community is working on impact that the members can feel so that they can have impact. Like, it is truly a ripple effect of impact, and how we think about how that shows up and the little decisions we make throughout the day can have that ripple effect, for better or for worse.
Yeah. So when I think of impact, this next question is a perfect follow on to that. So I want you to just look out, think about the future of business. What do you see, and how do you want Chief to influence that future?
I just think about our campaign we launched this month for Women's History Month. We're calling it Women's Future Month. And the question we posed is, what does the future look like when women lead the way? And that's what I see. I see that.
Ooh, I just got the chills.
If Chief fulfills its mission, we have not just brought more women into leadership positions, which we are already doing, and we are seeing the effect of that, but we are truly driving the impact of what it looks like to change the face of leadership. Because yes, our mission is to do that, but the mission has a greater output, which is really having a net positive effect on the world and society at large.
Wow. Okay, Carolyn, what would you say?
Carolyn's like +1.
I know. I mean,
Ditto.
I feel like that is what I need to say. That was just so well articulated. It is why she is our chief brand officer, the words. The thing that I actually think often too is like, it is not just like the impact that is on the individual. I actually think about the companies as well, and the like change that Chief can have on companies more broadly. And like, I do want to get to a place where like it is almost socially irresponsible not to sponsor individuals in your company to be members of Chief. That we need to start making investments in leadership in a different way. And that, we have built something so impactful and powerful that it almost becomes, like I said, socially irresponsible not to do, and not to sponsor somebody into it. And for people to have just great pride of being a part of Chief.
I love that. Whoa, love that. All right, we're going to end with something a little fun. We're going to do a little speed round. All right, first, what's your favorite word?
Pool noodle.
What? Pool noodle? Like the noodle you lay on in a pool?
Say it. Pool noodle. It's the best word in the world. This is it. You can ask anybody in my life that knows me, do you know Lindsay's favorite word? And if you know me, they will know the answer is pool noodle.
This doesn't surprise me at all.
Hilarious. Okay, your favorite word, Carolyn.
Oh my God. This says so much about the two of us. She immediately goes to like pool noodle, and I'm like, my favorite word is yes. I just think it is this opening of opportunity. And like, it's just so great to be able to receive it and say it.
Okay. Favorite movie?
Go ahead, Linz.
Okay, to be honest, I don't have favorites of anything because, again, that forces me to commit.
Okay,
right?
Use the word impact. I'm going to push you.
But
What's
I would
the movie
say
that had impact?
Recently, probably in my head, Interstellar. Again, I love time travel. I love strong women thinking about changing the future and making things brighter. Kind of combines all of my favorite things.
Okay. Carolyn.
Oh, I also really struggle to choose, so I'm gonna go with like a broader genre, which is always like the like sports hero coming through type of thing. Like I loved Cutting Edge when I was young.
Classic
like the
Carolyn.
ice
I
skaters
love
like,
that.
go and accomplish it. Like I don't know. I'm trapped in like a adolescent teen girls tasting
Hey,
movie.
whatever works. I still think a 16 Candles a lot,
There you go.
having two daughters. All right, Netflix or Apple TV?
Netflix.
I think Apple TV has made strides, and I'm really enjoying Severance. So today I'm going to say Apple TV.
Okay.
Mm. I
Comedy.
think it has more potential. I agree, but there's just too much content on Netflix. I
know.
run out in
There
like
is.
a day on Apple.
It's true.
It's a good point. All right, comedy or drama?
Comedy.
Drama.
No, you're just saying that to be today.
Contrarian. All right,
You sometimes you need a good cry.
I agree. What's the one that makes you cry?
Oh dear. Honestly, like you would not guess it because I do think I am somebody who is like a fairly like calm, collected, like you I once was described by somebody who's like, you're kind of like that duck that's like or goose or swamp. I don't know what I was. I was an animal on a lake that was like gliding across, but underneath they're just like frantically going. I definitely give a little bit of that like calm exterior that doesn't have high emotion to it. But I cry pretty easily. So like I wouldn't be able to like I will shed a tear at many a thing.
Have you seen Steel Magnolias, by the way?
Oh my gosh, yeah, clearly.
Ooh, gets me every
Who
time.
doesn't cry in that?
Oh my God. All right, most influential person in your life?
I mean, my current life, it is I don't think I can choose. It is my parents. I think that like they have just been, and I've been actually really lucky that I've got to spend a bunch of time with them over the last few years. With the pandemic, I am like living with my parents and get to see them every day. And it has made me like realize just how good they are as people. There's a colleague that my dad worked with like years ago that has MS that lives in a home. And my dad calls him every day just to like say hello because he doesn't have a lot of people around him. And like, I just see that and have just such an appreciation for who they are as people. And I hope that some of that was passed down to me. I hope that I can be as good of people as they are.
Lindsay, how about you?
I would also say my parents as well. My dad works his butt off. He owns a bar and restaurant, and he puts his heart, soul, his time, his back into that job with such determination and grit. And my mom also still works and is just one of the most empathetic, trusting, down to earth, wonderful, people first women that I've ever met. And I'm very thankful for the values that they instilled in me. And I credit them with just giving me the ability to find Carolyn and make Chief work.
Do they know the impact that they've had on both of you?
Oh, I don't want to tell them. I don't want that to go to their head. I do. I think that like there's definitely a trait that they have passed down of, you know, humility, and that I don't think even if you say it to them, it really resonates. But I do know that, you know, their proudest achievement is us as children and daughters. And, you know, I I've been pretty successful, but the irony is that like when I was younger, I was like the black sheep of the family that like my grandmother was like, don't send her to college. That's a waste of time. And like, so my sisters are incredibly great, accomplished people as well. And I think my parents should be really proud of what they have done and the kids that, I mean, if I do say so myself.
Yeah, I love that. I love that you just said that. All right. So here's my last question. You can have dinner with anyone you admire. They could be alive or dead. Doesn't matter. Who would you choose and why?
Lindsay.
We're going out tomorrow, Carolyn.
I choose.
We have dinner plans tomorrow.
I honestly like. I think that the last few years have been very isolating, and we haven't been able to spend a ton of time together as co-founders or together as a broader team. And so like right now in this moment, I would choose the team of Chief and being able to spend more time with them.
Me too.
You have the same answer?
Oh, you're copying me.
Okay. Jeannie's looking for like alive or dead, anyone.
Yeah, I know.
She's thinking big. Off the cuff, I would probably go for an Eleanor Roosevelt. Just to get
I knew you were going to say that.
Really? Just like to get some historic context. I didn't pay enough attention in history in high school. And I would love a dinner table of like women of history that I could mooch off of for an hour and a half.
Can we go forward? I would choose the first female president. That is who I would like to.
Oh, you time traveled, Cece. Brilliant.
What would be your question you'd ask her?
What year is it?
Ooh, what year is it? But what would you want to know? Like what's the one thing that you would hone in on?
Oh gosh, I don't know. I didn't think that far in advance. I was just honestly, I think it is more around like I love just hearing people's journeys of like how they got to where they got, and I'm so fascinated to know what that journey will look like for somebody who breaks that ultimate ceiling that still exists.
Yeah. What a fantastic way to end this conversation. So Carolyn and Lindsay, thank you for being you. Thank you for creating Chief. Thank you for inviting me to play a part in this journey. And I honestly cannot wait to see what happens next.
You and me both.
Thank you for joining me for another episode of the Warriors at Work show. If you are interested in learning more about what we do at the Warriors at Work show and platform, be sure to go over to my website, Jeanie Coomber, and subscribe to my monthly Warrior Playbook newsletter. I share everything that I'm up to month by month, as well as some lessons and insights that I've learned. I'm also interested in hearing any feedback you have about this conversation or future topics. So reach out to me directly on jc@jeanniecoomber.com or on LinkedIn. Be sure to tell your friends and your colleagues about this Warriors at Work conversation. Subscribe, review, and rate us. It's the best way to get this message out into the world. Be well.